Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, CB Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, MUSS Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, PALIN Enterprises, Rosenthal & Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Studley, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.
Hello, my name is Micael Stoler, host of the Stoler Report, Real Estate Trends in the Tri-State Region. 6 years ago, the tragic events in 9/11 took place. At that time, you would read the newspaper, we lost 12 million square feet of office space, we lost apartments, we lost the economy. And people, I remember doing my first show 7 years ago, and people said, no one's going to come back to Lower Manhattan. Nobody wanted to be near the tragic events. No one wanted to be there. And today, the world is totally different. We have a vibrant Lower Manhattan, construction, cranes, and everything. But really, as opposed to me telling you what's happening, I have three gentlemen who really know what's happening in Lower Manhattan, who live, work, and see what's happening in Lower Manhattan. I'd like to welcome Steve Witkoff, a numerous past guest of the Witkoff Organization, Joe Harbert, COO of the New York Metropolitan Region of Cushman & Wakefield, and last but not least, Ben McGrath, CFO and EVP of Edward J. Minskoff Equities. You were there. You were there on 9/11. I remember, Steve, you've been on my show. You were there at 9/11. Today is 9/11. We're taping a show. What's happened? I mean, what has really gone on? It's phenomenal.
I was there, on top of that heap also, but everything has changed. It's been a total transformation. City, state, business people all came together, and there's just been a remarkable rebirth, and I don't think people understand just how deep it is because there's so much construction activity down there. It's tough to get around, and people seize on that issue, but it's come back in just an incredible way, and I think the bellwether is the retailers. The retailers are down there today, and it's just incredible.
You know what? Some of the retailers, I think what Ben's organization is really going to bring a total focus. I mean, at 101 Warren, you're doing what?
Well, we have a 1 million square foot property going up, but the really exciting feature of it for Lower Manhattan is 200,000 square feet of retail, bringing a 70,000 square foot Whole Foods, a 37,000 square foot Bed Bath & Beyond, a 33,000 square foot Barnes & Noble, other tenants, a public parking garage, and there's very little public parking in the neighborhood. It's going to be transformational for that corner of Tribeca.
You know, here's the question I always have. Lower Manhattan, Tribeca. Isn't that Lower Manhattan, or is that Tribeca?
Depends upon whether you're talking to the residents of Tribeca about building a building in their neighborhood. It's definitely Tribeca then.
Yeah.
If you're talking to the city, maybe it's Lower Manhattan. The truth is, when they drew the lines after 9/11, they drew it along Murray Street, and we're right above it.
Okay. But, you know, this is an important point. One of the areas, Joe handles a magnitude of areas for Cushman & Wakefield, Westchester, Connecticut, Long Island, and, and New Jersey, as well as running New York. Lower Manhattan, the building that you're building, the site that you were building on, you were planning to build an office building over there originally.
On September 6th of 2001, we were testifying before the community on an EIS scoping hearing. and we had an EIS more or less completed, and we were going to build a 1.5 million square foot office building on that site. And 9/11 rolled around, and the city thought the most important thing that could happen would be to expedite that building. And we scrambled for a few months to expedite the construction of that building, and finally the lights went on, and the city realized that there was no need to build a new office building.
You know, here's my question. Now, last week they announced the construction, the planned construction starting in a couple of weeks of 2 of the 3 Freedom Towers over there in the Trade Center. Larry Silverstein was on last year, you know, and I still remember it was right at the opening of 7 World. You know, people were worried that you could get $50 a foot if you could get them. Now he's getting $75 a foot. What happened in the office market? Why has Lower Manhattan become what it was? Because Lower Manhattan has had cycles. Prior to the early 90s, it was busy. Then in the 90s, it went dead. You know, then we had 9/11. What happened, Joe?
Things picked up in Midtown, and there was a lot of pressure coming out of Midtown in terms of pricing and availability. We're at very low availability rates compared to our historical averages, and there's a lot of pressure for people to find space. They can't find it in Midtown. Midtown South, which used to be a pressure relief valve for Midtown, really doesn't have big blocks of space. So the place where we've had the big blocks of space in the last few years has been downtown. So that's part of what's driven the success of 7 World Trade Center, and we think it's going to continue to drive the lease up of Freedom Tower and the other 3 properties.
So my question for all 3 of you, can we absorb this, the 3 new towers? You know, JP Morgan's tower is spoken for, so I'm not worried about that. Can we absorb all of that space over the next 2 or 3, over the next 4 to 5 years?
I would say yes.
Steve?
I would say there's challenges.
Okay, you're positive, and you have some sentiment on that.
I just think that that there's serious financial upheaval out there. We have yet to hear about the job reductions. Guaranteed they're coming at every major house. I think the carried interest tax is the redo on the carried interest tax, while probably equitable, is a disaster for New York City, particularly given the circumstances right now with the debt crisis as it is. And I think that it is the financial companies that drive the marketplace. They absolutely do. Lehman goes into the marketplace for 1 million square feet, and it gets everybody thinking. And when they start letting people go, God forbid you get back. I mean, Joe, it's not going to take a long, it doesn't take a lot for people to put sublet space on the market and everybody to sort of have a sea change with regard to their attitudes on space taking. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not that smart. I just think there are challenges now.
But Ben, what you recently did is, how many condos did you have in 101 Warren?
We had 227 condos.
And you've sold 225.
Correct.
Of the 227 condos at an average price of $1,550 a square foot. So let's just look at it this way. Somebody is in contract for you to buy a condo, and it's relating a little bit to Steve's story, for $1,550 a foot. They've given you 10 or 20% of the purchase.
20%.
They've given 20% of the purchase price. And now they have to go into the mortgage market. I mean, Countrywide lays off 12,000 people. They don't have enough money to fund their situation. Certain of these people are planning, okay, somebody paying $1,550, there's a budget, but there's still a budget. And they thought they were going to get a 5.25% mortgage, and now they're going to have to pay a 7% mortgage. They'll probably close because they have so much money up at stake. But don't you think that the other developments in Lower Manhattan, and Steve is talking about all this construction, all these other things, there are all these buildings being built. I mean, you got the Sitai, you got this one, you got 75 Wall. Fortunately, Cipriani residents at 55, you're sold out, or pretty close to being sold out over there.
I bet 80%.
Okay, 80%. But there is a lot of product coming on board. And what Steve is saying with his economic problems, don't you think some of these condos aren't going to sell that quick?
Some of the new buildings may be challenged only because of the imbalance of supply and demand. when we say that we sold 225 apartments at $1,550 a foot, that includes a lot of apartments sold later in the process at much, much more than $1,550 a foot. So the buyer who comes in and might feel a little stress closing also feels like they're buying something that's worth 20, 30% more than the contract price. So they're going to be very happy. Now, if other buildings in Lower Manhattan are looking at our experience and starting their pricing at that level, may be difficult. I believe we delivered a better product than the other buildings are delivering, and so we got a better price.
Steve?
Well, first of all, Mike, I was talking about office space.
No, I agree, but I want to get to the...
No, but I think it has a percolating effect on condos. But I would tell you that 10-year T-bills are way down. I want to say they're 432 today, so they're way down. And if the Fed drops rates, they're going to be even less than that.
Right, but
so
Steve, what people are doing, lenders are saying, you know what, as opposed to my spread being 125 over, I'm going to charge you 250 over. So effectively, they don't care what the rates are. They're going to charge that.
That's true, but the fact is, like for instance, at 55, and I don't want to turn this into an advertisement for 55, but the fact is, but it's a good statistic, we are selling quite a bit of condos, and I don't know what experience you had, Ben, but we're selling quite a bit of condos to European buyers. Mm-hmm. Now that currency trade is huge, mm-hmm. and so that's cushioning it. When I say challenged, I say the following. I think New York is inimitable. It is. There's just not many cities in the world like it. London maybe being one. Tokyo. I don't even put Paris in the category. And maybe a Beijing or a Shanghai. So I think New York is inimitable, and as long as we have a good, solid political structure here, it's always going to be relatively good. But the fact of the matter is that what drove the market last year and the year before were these large bonuses that were being paid every single year. And everybody goes out and they get these bonuses, and from the bottom on up, and they spend their money. And I don't think the psychology is there to go out and spend money the way people used to in the past days. And I think that extends to office leasing too. It's my own personal opinion.
And I really want to get that question on the office leasing. A lot of people who went to Lower Manhattan went there because it was the low-cost alternative. And you just said it before. Midtown South, there was no space. But besides the space situation, you were able to go to Lower Manhattan and pay $25 a foot in an older building. Steve Witkoff owned a number of these older buildings. But in addition to that, you were able to get a tenant on incentives. As one of my guests, Ofer Yardeni, would say, was like Robin Hood. You gave from the rich and the poor. If they came from a different state, he was happy. What happens now to these tenants if they don't have these incentives? Will they go to Brooklyn, or will they go to Long Island City?
Well, there's some pretty serious incentives to go to Brooklyn and Long Island City. They really are. You can still end up in the 20s and doing a deal in Queens.
The REAP benefit.
The REAP benefit is fantastic.
It's huge, and they have it for downtown though. Still,
there's
don't
still
they?
some incentives,
but not quite as much.
But Lower Manhattan is still the second largest business district in the country, next to Midtown. It's there. I mean, the construction cranes, retail. You said is improving. I think. What really is improving with what you and Ed Minskoff are putting together, of putting a 70,000 square foot Whole Foods to put the first Bed Bath & Beyond. I mean, because the Home Depot didn't work on Hudson Street. I mean, there's been a need.
Well, there's never been large scale retail in Lower Manhattan. Even in the best days of the Trade Center, I think the Borders store was the largest store there, and all the other large stores were either banks and a few limited stores. And they were 10,000 square feet. There was never a affordable, large-scale retail complex in Lower Manhattan. Now, I just want to go back to the office market relative to Long Island City, New Jersey. The last time the Lower Manhattan office market really took off in the late 90s, it was still pretty bleak at night downtown. There were some buildings being converted, and the Downtown Alliance and the city deserve kudos for getting that going. Now it's completely different. Look at the articles about Stone Street and the activity there in the evening, all over Lower Manhattan, and extending all the way up into Tribeca and NoHo. And now I think companies can compare Lower Manhattan directly with Midtown in the past, they'd have to make excuses to their employees for moving them downtown. Now there's a real reason to move downtown, and I think it's a better location than
I think
the other boroughs or
I think,
New Jersey.
you know, when the Lefracks have been on my show and they're talking about Newport, and you know they say a new restaurant's opening up, I said, oh, it's an Olive Garden, and you know, or the new amenity is another Duane Reade. People who are going into an office building in Lower Manhattan, they need the amenities. They need the bookstore. They need the, you know, I mean, I see it where I'm working at the Time Warner Center. I can't believe how busy Whole Foods is. 18 hours a day. You know, there are people over there, and people who are working in the World Financial Center, maybe a little walk, they're going to be walking over to your building. And I think this is part of reading the plan today. In all three new buildings, there is between 110,000 to 190,000 square feet of new retail being built in the buildings in the Trade Center. But I think why your people rent space downtown in Lower Manhattan? Why are they there? I mean, who are the new tenants renting?
You have a lot of tenants coming from Midtown. And the interesting thing about this year, prior to the credit crisis, you're seeing mostly small to mid-sized deals downtown. You only actually had 2 deals over 100,000 square feet downtown. So we've had this decline in the vacancy rate and a pickup in leasing activity, mostly from small to mid-sized tenants. A good 30 to 40% of the tire kickers and the people looking at space are coming from Midtown. Going back to a point you made earlier about the low-cost alternative, downtown really still is the low-cost alternative when you compare it to what's happened in Midtown, where rents have spiked over the last 18 months. You're looking at a recent deal where, small deal obviously, but a rent that averaged over $200 a foot. You come downtown for $48 a foot, it looks like a good deal. Steve, you just did a deal in the 50s.
By the way,
Class A space in the 50s looks like a bargain.
Deal. Right, and it is a great deal. By the way, I agree. I agree with you, Joe. I'm just simply saying that I don't know if anybody in this room is smart enough to understand the fallout at some of these larger financial firms and how that plays out later on, particularly with some of the hedge funds and the private equity firms.
Just 2 points on that. One is that over the about 35% of the space occupied in Manhattan is by financial service firms. In the last run-up in the market, you're correct, it's really been financial services and the service firms attached to them, people doing M&A and the law firms and so forth.
Right.
But really, you've got 60%, close to 60%, that's been growth in other industries as well. Now, financial services really slow down, and we lose 50,000 jobs. Big number. We're still going to be up around 8 to 9% vacancy rate, which is below equilibrium,
right,
and which would actually have a salutary effect on people being able to stay in Manhattan and rent space at more affordable prices.
Yeah, another point you wanted to make.
The second point is there's actually less inventory now than there was in 1994.
Really?
Yes, sir. A couple million square feet less.
Right, but you have to remember we lost the space. We lost 12 million square feet. We lost also 6 million, as you said prior to the show, for conversion. Right. So, you know, with all this space, the people have to go somewhere. You know, and that's why maybe Vornado on 125th Street with the REIT benefits, that building, the 600,000 square feet is going to be an interesting, but I don't want to get to Harlem. We really want to talk about Lower Manhattan. Steve Witkoff has said on this show in the past, going to Lower Manhattan, not on the office, was the low-cost alternative. It was the place where somebody could get a piece of the rock at a cheap price. What happened, Steve Witkoff?
They went down there and they bought, and they all made money. Yeah. It's just, by the way, it's just what Ben was saying. All those people who went into 101 Warren initially and bought it well below the 1550 average, they have a 1550 average because the last 30% of the building traded at over 2,000 a square foot. So all those people made a lot of money and they're awful happy today. And that's a wonderful thing.
You know, but unfortunately, people who watch my show live in New York, work in New York, and many of them wanted to live in Lower Manhattan. They'd like to live in Lower Manhattan. They work there. And now, $1,550 to me is not affordable. It's not an affordable price. It's an affordable price for the 225 lucky people. Now, you have another component to your project. You have 89 how many residential apartments in 89?
168.
You have 168 apartments, and that's broken down. 50% of them are in a category of some type of affordability.
Correct.
Let's go over that and tell my audience, because some of them may even win that lottery.
Well, in acquiring the site from the City of New York, we agreed to make 50% of the rental building affordable. And the program that the city wanted to use is 50% market rate, 30% middle income, and 20% low income. Now we've initiated the lotteries for the low and
explain
middle
to
income.
my viewers. 50% could be leased to anybody around
Yes.
in the market. If they want to pay $60 a square foot,
Yes.
which is basically the rent that you're hoping to get, which you'll probably achieve for those. Then there's 50% of the other units which are available through a lottery, correct?
Yes.
And of that 50%, what percentage are at the 175% of the area median income?
30% of the units, or roughly 44 units, are available at 175% of area median. So that's a family of four making about $125,000.
Up to 125.
Up to 125,000.
Up to 125,000.
And then the other 20% are at 50% of area median income.
Which basically area median income is about $72,000, so it's $36,000.
Yeah, the way HUD adjusts it, it's about 28,000.
28,000. So now we have 20% of the units, or about 40 units, correct? Which are available. How many applications? How many people applied for these 40
Thousands and
units?
thousands.
20,000, isn't it?
For the both buckets combined, about 20,000 applications.
And
And the city is very good at supervising, I should say, or monitoring the process. It's very objective, and a certain number of the applications are opened and a certain number are rejected. And at the end of the day, a lucky few get
They
a
really
very
win the
beautiful
lottery.
apartment at a very, very good price.
But unfortunately, New York City, as Steve said and Joe said and you said, we need people to work in these buildings, okay? We don't have only investment bankers. We have all these people who have to work there. And as I said a number of years ago, and I'll continue to say, unfortunately, Lower Manhattan probably, even though we've rented, we've sold, has the worst situation. They don't have affordable apartments to speak of in Lower Manhattan for the working people.
They do and they don't. Michael, you have to remember that the Lower East Side is not that far away. And there's a tremendous stock of affordable housing above and below the Williamsburg Bridge, all the way down to the Brooklyn Bridge. And a lot of those people do work in Lower Manhattan. These people are the engine of the office staff of many companies that operate in Lower Manhattan.
So what type of companies do we see, what type of companies are going to be leasing today? You said they're not only financial service firms. I know Darby and Darby leased in 7. Ken Swig has numerous buildings over there. Who's the tenant? Who's the tenant leasing in the Woolworth building?
Well, we're just starting there. I don't know. I'm going to talk to Joe about it.
What happened? You kept the Woolworth building vacant?
I think the tenant. I think it's going to be a lower. The Woolworth building is fantastic views. I think it's going to be, as Joe says, a lower cost alternative for boutique space to people who would otherwise maybe go to Midtown Manhattan.
Now, were you going to convert that building at one time?
We were, but we don't love the condo business. But I just want to get back to the affordable thing just for a second. I just want to make my sort of gratuitous comment, and that is that and I've said it many times before, believe that we need much more affordability programs out there, and I think that it's a dangerous thing, and I'll just anecdotally talk about a situation we had. We had a site on 44th Street, Ben and Joe, and we just sold the site, and we sold it because they reduced the $80-20 out there. And the fact is that we own that site cheap enough, and this analogy is fitting for downtown. We own that site cheap enough, and we have a very long-term view to have built it as an 80-20, and we wanted to build it as an 80-20.
Which for my viewers means 80% would be market rate and 20% would be affordable.
And we wanted to do that, and by any economic model you want to use, you make less building an 80-20 than you do a full conventional or a condo. And we wanted to do that. And the fact is they gutted the 80-20 program. So
That's right.
I think that, and we couldn't do it. So just imagine when you have a low land basis and you can't do it, what it says about projects that have high land basis, and there's high land basis out there today. So I think the mayor's doing a great job, by the way. I really do. I think he's proactive, the way he bought the land in Queens for affordable housing. But we need more affordable housing here because people need a place to live. And
You know, what about the arch nemesis, the sixth borough, as people say, Jersey City? Is it the nemesis? Are they I mean, I know you run Jersey City also for Cushman. Are people, are the tenants who might be going to Lower Manhattan going to Jersey City? Do you see
Most
more
of the tenants that are going to Jersey City are people moving around on the Jersey Gold Coast and some spillover from Lower Manhattan.
So we don't have to worry about that law firm who's in Midtown, okay, who's thinking, or somebody who's at 101 Avenue of the Americas, or one of the Minskoff properties in Midtown, moving to Jersey City, as you
No,
say.
I think the underlying assumption is people want to be in Manhattan.
I agree with you.
They just want to be here. They want to live here. They want to work here.
It's a fabulous place to live. People say it. Everybody says it. I think, honestly, the number one thing that could really undercut it all is bad political circumstances out there. If New York City was ever perceived as not being as stable as it is today.
What about retail? All of the stories of Hermes opening up, and Tiffany. I mean, did Hermes really open up because they needed a store, or was it a very low-cost special deal?
Well, I can't speak to their special deal or any aspects of that transaction, but I will say that Lower Manhattan still enjoys 5 million plus visitors a year, and come 2010, 2012, whenever the memorial is complete, I believe the projections that we'll see 10 million plus visitors a year.
I mean, to clarify and to make a point on that, the largest number of visitors in the world go to Lower Manhattan. Okay, of the 44 million visitors to New York, 8 million go to Lower Manhattan. And, that's what's happening right now in Lower Manhattan with these numerous, I mean, more than 20 new hotels are opening up in Sam Chang country, as I joke with him, building up these little hotels. But all over Lower Manhattan is hotels. I mean,
it's wonderful. But, I agree with Ben, what you're saying about retail, and I analogize it to when I first started in the business 20 years ago. I bought my first buildings in Washington Heights in the Bronx. And I remember driving up Fordham Road, and there were no major retailers on Fordham Road in those days. And yet the demographics were amazing. There were just a lot of people with a lot of spending power. And 10 years later, all the major retailers came in. They woke up and they said, a lot of spending power up here, and they came in. And the
Fordham
same
Road
thing
looks
is
like a shopping mall today.
right.
but
same thing's happening in
we don't
downtown
have
Manhattan.
much time, but
It's happening on 125th Street.
But
Right.
125th Street, but I think another thing is, at one time, Nordstrom's, who's been looking all over, Lower Manhattan might be a place for Nordstrom's. I mean, with what you had, you had a large enough space they could have moved into yours. But I think it's really good in that manner. I just got the hint that it's hard to believe, we've finished 30 minutes, and in order to really talk about Lower Manhattan, what's going on, I don't need 30 minutes, I need 300 minutes. And I'd like to thank Steve Witkoff, Joe Harbert, and Ben McGrath to talk about what's happening in Lower Manhattan, which from all senses is only positive. Next week, we move a little bit away from Lower Manhattan to Tribeca and Hudson Square. Thank you. See you next week.
Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, MUSS Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, PALIN Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Studley, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.